What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I have another great video for you guys, this time ranking the top 5 revenge seasons in NBA history. And I think when talking about revenge, it's always important for a player's legacy, or an overall team's legacy. How do they bounce back when they face adversity, and how do they bounce back when they face criticism? These 4 players in this one team faced tremendous adversity, and they bounced back in a big way, and ultimately got their revenge. So before I get into this video, if you haven't already subscribed, make sure to do so, and if you could like this video, I'd greatly appreciate it. So with that out of the way, let's get into this top 5 list. So first up at number 5, we have Kobe's 2010 season, and out of my whole list, this is the only year where it was delayed gratification, as Kobe's initial point of revenge came back in 2008 when he lost to the Boston Celtics in Game 6 by a record margin 39 points. And it took a full 2 years before we saw that team again in the 2010 finals. Now, we're looking at Kobe's 2010 season. He averaged 27 points per game, which is the 4th most in the NBA, 5.4 boards, 5.0 assists, 1.5 steals on 45, 32, and 81 splits. And the Lakers this year will have the best record in the Western Conference, winning 57 games, and Kobe finished 3rd in MVP voting. So at face value, a pretty dominant year from Kobe so far. But where you have to look to is the playoffs, where his revenge finally came. And this 2010 playoff run is a legendary run, as this year's Western Conference had 8 50-win teams. I'll repeat that, 8 50-win teams in this conference. And the Lakers, being the first seed, would play the 8th seed Oklahoma City Thunder, who did win 50 games. And they would win that series in 6 games, beating a young KD, a young Westbrook, and a young James Harden. Now in the second round, Kobe would face off against a veteran Jazz team. They won 53 games. You had Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer, Paul Millsap, Andre Kirilenko. You had some pretty good depth and some pretty good superstar power on this Jazz team, and LA swept them a perfect 4-0. Now in the Western Conference Finals, the Lakers would play the 54-win Suns, led by Steve Nash, Amar Stoudemire, Jason Richardson, and Grant Hill. And looking back on this series, it is a pretty underrated series. This Suns team took the Lakers 6 games, and Kobe in this series averaged 33, 8, and 7 on 52, 43, and 88 splits. And you could argue this series was also more revenge for Kobe for the 06 playoffs when they blew a 3-1 lead. So now looking ahead to the NBA Finals, once again the Lakers would play the Boston Celtics, who they had lost to in 2008. And like any Boston vs LA series, it's always highly intense and highly competitive. And this series was no different, going the full length of 7 games. And I think looking at this series overall top to bottom, this is probably the best final series of the 21st century. And that Game 7 in LA was an epic performance, as Kobe did not have his best shooting night, but he still had 23 points, 15 boards, and 2 assists. And like I said, this Game 7 went down to the wire, and in the 4th quarter Kobe had 10 points, 4 boards, on 1 for 4 shooting, but he was 8 for 9 from the free throw line, and he scored the most points in that 4th quarter out of anyone in this game. And like you guys know, LA win this Game 7 by 4 points, and Kobe would win his 5th championship and his 2nd straight Finals MVP, averaging 28.6 points per game, 8.0 boards, 3.9 assists, 2.1 steals on 40, 31, and 88 splits. And not only was this series revenge for Kobe, it was also vindication for past performances versus Boston, and at this point his legacy was set in stone, and you really could not critique Kobe at this point in time. So taking all that into account, I rank this 2010 season as the 5th best revenge season in NBA history. Now looking ahead to the number 4 spot, we have Magic Johnson's 1985 season. And this year Magic came back with a vengeance after the 84 finals, where he was absolutely awful. Throughout the entire series, he choked numerous times, he missed crucial free throws, he turned the ball over late constantly, and he simply did not play to Magic Johnson standards. And that 84 final series was really the first time Magic ever faced adversity in the NBA. He'd already won 2 championships, including Finals MVP in 1980, and so far in his early career, it had been smooth sailing. But the 84 finals was a turning point for Magic and his Lakers team. And all throughout the offseason, Magic was called Tragic Johnson, he was called a choker, and everything in his legacy was brought into question, and the Bird vs Magic debates were at an all-time high. So heading into the 85 season, Magic had tons of motivation. And looking at his numbers this year, he averaged 18.3 points per game, 12.6 assists, 6.2 boards on 56, 18, and 84 splits. And the Lakers will have the best record in the Western Conference, winning 62 games, and Magic would finish 2nd MVP voting, only behind one Larry Bird. Now all of that is definitely great, but where you really prove it is in NBA playoffs. And looking at how Magic played versus the Western Conference, it was an absolute breeze. This Lakers team had an 11-2 record, and they easily made it to the NBA Finals, with Magic averaging 17.2 points per game, 15.8 assists, 7.2 boards 1.5 steals on 52% shooting. And the 85 finals for the Lakers team would be a huge wake-up call, as in Game 1, they would lose in Boston by 34 points, and this game was dubbed the Boston Massacre. And after that huge Game 1 loss, all that doubt, all that criticism definitely came back to Magic and this Lakers team. But over the next 5 games, Magic would average 18.2 points per game, 14.4 assists, 8.0 boards, 2.0 steals on 47-50 and 88 splits. And the Lakers win the championship in 6 games. And I think after that devastating Game 1 loss, this Lakers team, they could have rolled over and they could have given up right there, but they still had championship experience and they still had a lot of fight left in them, and you could see that over the last 5 games of the series. And I think Magic at this point had really regained his status as one of the best players in the league, and he had everyone's respect in the entire NBA. So that is why I rank this year for Magic as the 4th best revenge season of all time. Now, looking ahead to number 3, we have the 2014 Spurs collectively as a team. I didn't want to choose just one player, as this 2014 season was a collective team effort in order to get revenge on the Miami Heat. And when looking at this 2014 Spurs team and what got them to this point, it was the 2013 Finals, as they were up 3-2 on the Heat and were about as close as you could get to winning a championship. But some costly mistakes at the end of that game by Greg Popovich, Tim Duncan, as well as Kawhi would have that championship nearly slip out of their hands. And to come that close to winning a championship, that could mentally destroy a player as well as a whole team. But the 2014 Spurs were the exact opposite. They hardened and they came together and they came back stronger in 2014. As in 2014, they had the best record in the NBA, winning 62 games. And when it came to playoffs, once again, they faced tremendous adversity. In the first round, they were taking 7 games by the Dallas Mavericks, who had Dirk, Monte Ellis, and Vince Carter. And in Game 7, Tony Parker would pull it out with 32 points. And in the second round, the Spurs would face the 54-win Blazers, and they would win in 5 games. In the Western Conference Finals, they would play the 59-win Thunder with KD and Westbrook. And now we get to the NBA Finals, where the revenge finally happens. And the Spurs once again matched up against the Miami Heat, who had won 54 games and were the defending champions. And this series once again was a clash of 2 different styles, team basketball versus individual greatness. This Spurs team once again, top to bottom, played as a team and they played together for each other. And in my personal opinion, they are one of the top 3 passing teams of all time. The ball movement in this series was insane. We had Boris Diaw, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, Kawhi, all being unselfish and all playing beautiful team basketball. And I wish this series had more drama, but frankly, it was a beatdown by the Spurs team. They won this series by a record margin, and they won in 5 games. And Kawhi was the Finals MVP, averaging 17.8 points per game, 6.4 boards, 2.0 assists on 61, 59, and 78 splits. This 2014 Finals MVP gets a lot of backlash. They say it's one of the worst of all time, and to a certain extent I agree with that, but over the final 3 games of that series, Kawhi Leonard will play like an absolute superstar, averaging 23.7 points per game, 9.3 boards, 2.3 assists, 2.0 steals, as well as 2.0 blocks on 68, 53, and 84 splits. So Kawhi Leonard in this series was the driving force behind this victory, but I think overall the 2014 Spurs team, it was a collective effort and a collective revenge season. That's why I ranked them at the number 3 spot. Now getting the top 2 at number 2, we have LeBron's 2012 season. And the origin for LeBron's Revenge comes in the 2011 Finals, as LeBron in this series would be absolutely pitiful, having the worst ever Finals performance for a superstar. He played terrible in the clutch, and he has a no-show in the 4th quarters. And it didn't help that Miami had formed a super team with D-Wade and Chris Bosh, and they lost as a heavy favorite to the underdog Dallas Mavericks. And heading into 2012, it was an all-out assault on LeBron James. He wasn't a winner, he was a choker, he had stacked the deck and failed, and overall it was a full-on onslaught on LeBron James, and his criticism was at an all-time high. But LeBron in the meantime would still play great basketball in the 2012 year, averaging 27.1 points per game, 7.9 boards, 6.2 assists, 1.9 steals on 53, 36, and 77 splits. And LeBron, he was the MVP, as well as first-team All-NBA and first-team All-Defense, and this Heat team won 46 games in a lockout year, the 2nd best record in the Eastern Conference. Now looking ahead to this playoffs, this Heat team was playing the Eastern Conference, which at the time was pretty decent, and in the first round, they played the 36-win Knicks, and they would win this series pretty easily in a gentleman's sweep in 5 games. But where it really gets interesting is the second round versus the Indiana Pacers, as in this series Miami will go down 2-1, losing Game 2 in Miami and Game 3 in Indiana. So it was a critical Game 4 in Indiana, a Game 5 in Miami, and a Game 6 back in Indiana. And in that 3-game stretch, LeBron James averaged 32.7 points per game, 11.3 boards, 8.0 assists, 2.0 steals, 1.0 blocks on 55, 28, and 80 splits. And his back at this point was quite literally against the wall, and I would say 95% NBA fans were rooting for him to fail at this point in time. And a similar thing would happen in the Eastern Conference Finals versus a familiar foe, that being the Boston Celtics. As in this series, Miami will go down 3-2, headed back to Boston for Game 6. And entering this Game 6 in Boston, I think the overall vibe around the league was that Boston was going to win this game and send Miami packing. But there was one guy in LeBron James who had different plans. As in this game, LeBron James would have 45 points, 15 boards, 5 assists on 73% shooting, and Miami would win by 19 points. And that was a big point in LeBron's career, and in my opinion, a top 3 game of his career given the circumstances as well as the overall context. Now in Game 7 back in Miami, LeBron James once again was very good, having 31 points, 12 boards, and 2 assists on 42% shooting, and he had some big time buckets down the stretch. So LeBron at this point had come back from down 2-1, as well as back from down 3-2. And when it came to the NBA Finals, this would probably be the least competitive series of this playoff run, as LeBron in this series would absolutely dominate, averaging 28.6 points per game, 10.2 boards, 7.4 assists on 47, 18, and 82 splits. And Miami would beat Oklahoma City in 5 games. And that right there was great, but I think the overall apex of LeBron James in this playoff run comes in that Game 6 in Boston. So in the 2012 playoffs, LeBron James, he got his revenge, and he came back down from some big deficits to win the series and clinch his revenge. And that's why I ranked this at the number 2 spot. Now looking at the number 1 spot, we have Michael Jordan in his 1996 season. And this year for Jordan was his first full year back from retirement, as in the 95 season, he would only play 17 games and flame out early in the second round versus the Orlando Magic. And in that series versus Orlando, Jordan had probably his biggest playoff failure, and that was in Game 1, where he had the ball stolen by Nick Anderson. And Chicago would lose that series in 6 games, losing Game 6 in Chicago, something at the time that hadn't happened in the 90s decade. And after that Game 6 loss, Michael Jordan came back with a vengeance in the offseason. He trained like crazy, he trained his body, his mind, and overall he came back stronger and he came back better. As in 96, he would average 30.4 points per game, the most in the NBA, 6.6 boards, 4.3 assists on 49, 42, and 83 splits. And it wasn't just Jordan who was dominating. This Bulls team won 72 games at the time, an NBA record. And Jordan this year was first team all defense, first team all NBA, the MVP, being only 4 votes shy unanimous, all-star game MVP, as well as the scoring champion. So top to bottom right there, he had an outstanding year, but still come playoff time, he had once again to prove himself versus that Magic team. So in the lead to that series, the Bulls in the first round play Miami Heat, in the second round, the New York Knicks. And they would beat the Heat in 3 games and the Knicks in 5 games. And after winning that series in New York, that would set up the rematch of Jordan and the Bulls versus Shaq and the Magic. And at this time, the Bulls were seen as the older veteran team, rightfully so, and the Magic were seen as the young team with a future with Penny, Shaq, and Nick Anderson, as well as Horace Grant. And I wish this series was more competitive, but it was an all-out assault on this Magic team. Jordan in this series averaged 29.5 points per game, 5.5 boards, 4.8 assists, 2.3 steals on ridiculous 52, 63, and 75 splits. And in the closeout Game 4 in Orlando, Jordan would have 45 points. So at that point, Jordan had kind of got his individual revenge, but there still was a goal of winning a championship. And in the finals, the Bulls were facing a very underrated Sonics team who won 64 games and had Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, as well as Detlef Schrempf. And this series versus the Sonics was far from Jordan's best finals performance. He still averaged 27.3 points per game, 5.3 boards, 4.2 assists, on 41, 31, 83 splits. Definitely some impressive numbers, but for Jordan standards, they were a little below average. And the Bulls, for the most part of this series, they would dominate the Sonics team. They kind of got bored in games 4 and 5, but ultimately, they would win in 6 games, and they win that game 6 on Father's Day. So definitely an emotional game, but in the end, Jordan and the Bulls, they got it done, they got the revenge, and they won the championship, winning 72 games in the process. So looking at Jordan's year in its totality, he was the MVP, the Finals MVP, first team all NBA, first team all defense, the All-Star Game MVP, and the points per game leader for both the playoffs as well as the regular season. That's why I rank this as the number 1 revenge season in NBA history. So that right there is my top 5 list. I think there's a lot of worthy seasons, Those are my top 5 in particular. If you guys want to, I could actually make a part 2 to this video, as there are some great revenge seasons in NBA history. But until then, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.